Welcome back. We are joined by the man who makes this required listening, our Secure Freedom Radio program. I'm always thrilled to have him with us, and I think all of you are as well. He is the great Andy McCarthy, former federal prosecutor turned pundit extraordinaire and best-selling author. You find him frequently at Fox, practically daily at National Review Online and or PJ Media, a prolific commentator on the challenges we're facing with respect to a lawless president, a man who is engaged in faithless execution, the title of his most recent books. Check out as well Willful Blindness and the Grand Jihad. Andy McCarthy, welcome back. Good to have you with us as always.
Frank, always great to be with you.
You have been musing about the faithless execution of the president with respect to the Iran deal, what I call the Obama bomb. Talk about what you found in the way of not just faithless execution, but outright lying to the Congress, and what your thoughts are about what should be done about it.
Well, I think that this has been, this whole Iran negotiation has been characterized by misleading statements, intentionally ambiguous statements, and now I think we're seeing flat-out lies, concealment, and conceit. And, you know, I keep going back to the same issue in my book that you were kind enough to mention, Frank, faithless execution. I keep going back to the reason I wrote the book, which is not so much to champion President Obama's impeachment, although I think, you know, certainly as a matter of law and politics, he merits impeachment. But impeachment obviously is a political remedy. If there's not a public mood to remove the president from power, it doesn't really matter how many impeachable offenses have been committed. But, you know, putting that aside, the reason I wrote the book is because we're in a constitutional system which has a finite number of checks on presidential overreach and abuse of power. And if you forswear those checks, you resign yourself to the president doing whatever he decides personally that he can get away with. And what we're seeing in this particular negotiation is that really play out in a major way, in a way that will be very, very damaging to American national security going forward. I mean, basically, we are in the process of not only allowing Iran, the world's number one state sponsor of terrorism, to be armed with the most destructive weapons known to man, long before they even get to that point, assuming they're not on the threshold of it at the moment.
Or across the threshold, for that matter.
Or across the threshold, right. But before we even get there, we're going to fill their coffers with $100 to $150 billion, which, you know, vis-a-vis the American economy, if you just drew an analogy, that's like injecting $8 trillion into their economy. And we're doing it under circumstances where they've been quite outright in saying that they absolutely plan to continue supporting their quote-unquote allies, by which they mean the terrorist organizations that they fund.
Yeah, and trying vociferously to bring about death to America. Andy, you are the first that I heard actually utter the word on this program, for that matter, as I recall, that this is treasonous. And I must say, I've wrestled with this ever since that conversation, and I can't find a more apt and accurate description for what the president has done here. You talk about the $150 billion and the context in which that's being turned over to these guys, and one of the things that jumps out at you is it's not just the terrorism, it's conventional arms, it's ballistic missiles, it's nuclear technology, and it's international help and protection for all of the above that is going to make it infinitely more dangerous. How can it be other than a betrayal of the oath of office and, for that matter, a violation of law?
It can't, Frank. Look, if this was a circumstance where the United States had a long-standing adversarial relationship with a country, and that country then came around and said, look, we want to have a new relationship with the United States. I'm thinking something along the lines of Libya, where they say, look, we're going to give up our nuclear program, This is back, of course, in the days after the 9/11 attack. We're going to give up our nuclear program. We're going to start cooperating with you in counterterrorism. We're going to open our intelligence files to you to help you identify people who are mutually a threat to you and to us. You would have a reason at that point to say, well, we're open to the idea of having a different relationship, but prove it to us. Here, this is a situation where this is a more powerful and more committed enemy to the United States that tells us throughout the negotiation that they still believe that death to America is not only a slogan, but their foreign policy, and which announces immediately after the deal is signed that they continue to laud the concept of death to America, and they are going to continue to support the terrorist organizations that practice anti-American jihad. So how it can be anything other than traitorous is beyond me. And look, my throat gets dry when I utter words like that in connection with the President of the United States. Up until this president, I would have thought that inconceivable. And I also think the probability is that Obama somehow has convinced himself that this is going to bring Iran around and turn them into a more normal country that won't be in an adversarial posture to the United States. But, it really doesn't matter in the long run whether he's doing this out of naivete, stupidity, or flat-out insidiousness. The fact of the matter is we have a committed enemy to the United States, and he is lending aid and comfort to the enemy. That's treason.
Material support of the greatest kind. And I think those who have pointed this out, Andy, and been castigated roundly by the president for suggesting that this is turning us into the largest state sponsor of terrorism in the world, it is incredible, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, he said yesterday, I think in a reference to Senator Cruz, that, how could somebody accuse me of being the leading sponsor or the leading supporter of terrorism in the world? And I'm sitting there incredulous. I mean, his own State Department, as recently as the last report that it did on this subject, concedes that Iran continues to be a major state sponsor of terrorism. The Iranians themselves have come out and said, we are not changing our ways. We believe in what we're doing. We're going to continue to do it. And Obama says, oh, okay, here's $100 to $150 billion. Now, if you had someone that you knew that was a state sponsor of terrorism or a terrorist organization itself, and somebody gave that organization assets that it knew were going to be used to support organizations like Hezbollah, the Justice Department would indict that person.
Even this Justice Department, presumably, would indict that person for a manifest violation of the law. And Eddie, I'm listening to you and thinking about what you're saying. It really brings home a point that I think can't be overstated, and that is that this president didn't just get to this point yesterday. He has been pulling these kinds of gambits, I think treasonous conduct, most recently, certainly in this case, but it's been building on a lot of other anti-constitutional activities, and nobody's documented this better than you in faithless execution. But he's gotten away with it. And if he gets away with this, my fear is Katie bar the door in what's left of this term. Andy McCarthy, we have to let you go, I'm afraid. I hope to continue this conversation and the monitoring of these travesties with you next week, and I hope that I'll be able to talk with all of you about it again tomorrow. Same time, same station. Until then, this is Frank Gaffney. Thanks for listening.